All right, let's talk about Shakespeare's Othello. It is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful, most gut-wrenching tragedies ever written. It's a story about love and betrayal and a jealousy so toxic it just incinerates everything in its path. But to really get the play, we've got to understand the man who wrote it and the wild world he was living in. So let's dive in.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the author himself. Then we'll explore the world that shaped his thinking. After that, we'll uncover the story's surprising origins, meet the three characters at the heart of the drama, and finally figure out why this 400-year-old play still hits so hard today.
Okay, first up, the Bard himself. For a guy who's such a giant in our culture, William Shakespeare is still kind of a mystery. A huge mystery, actually. So much so that some people still wonder if he was even the real author.
Yeah, it's a real debate. There's a whole group of scholars called anti-Stratfordians, and their argument is basically, how could a guy with his background possibly write these masterpieces? They suggest that maybe big names like Francis Bacon or even Queen Elizabeth I used his name as a cover. Now, the debate is still raging, but the plays themselves, well, they speak for themselves.
The official record, though, places him right here, in Stratford-upon-Avon. He was born to John and Mary Shakespeare. We don't have an exact birth certificate, but his baptism was recorded on April 26, 1564. So scholars pretty much agree his birthday was April 23rd. And get this, that's also the exact day he died, 52 years later. Kind of spooky, right?
And his journey was a heck of a ride. You can see it here. He starts in a small town, marries Anne Hathaway, but then heads to London, and his career just explodes. By 1599, he's not just some struggling writer, he's a part owner of the famous Globe Theatre. That's a huge deal! And just a few years later, Othello hits the stage for the first time, sealing his legacy forever. And how do we know he was making waves? Well, his rivals were absolutely furious. This quote is from Robert Greene, a playwright who actually went to university, and he couldn't stand that this upstart crow from the countryside, a guy with no fancy degree, was totally outshining him. You can just feel the jealousy dripping off the page. It's pretty much solid proof of how quickly he took over the scene.
So, we've got the man. But to understand his plays, you really have to understand his world. Early modern England was a time of massive change, huge discoveries, and, well, some deeply held beliefs that are pretty different from ours.
And the heart of that world was London. With about 200,000 people, it was the biggest city in Europe. A crowded, chaotic, and, sometimes dangerous place. It was the absolute center of everything: trade, politics, culture, and it's where a young Shakespeare went to make his name. Back then, science was dominated by ideas like the four humors. The belief was that these four fluids in your body controlled your entire personality. So, if you had too much yellow bile or choler, you were aggressive. Othello's courage in battle? That's positive choler. But his insane jealousy? That's the same humor turning toxic. And Iago's cold, plotting evil? You could say that's an excess of black bile or melancholy. Desdemona's loyalty and passion? Well, that's blood, a balanced, sanguine person. And this is where the magic happened. The Globe Theatre. It was this amazing open-air playhouse that could cram in up to 3,000 people. You had the groundlings, the regular folks, standing in the pit, while the rich got to sit in covered galleries. It was a loud, vibrant, and totally dynamic space where everyone from every walk of life came together for a show.
So we have the man, and we have his world. Now let's look at the play itself. Because, like a lot of his stuff, the story of Othello wasn't totally original. But what Shakespeare did with that story, that's where you see the genius.
The plot actually comes from this Italian collection of stories from 1565. And the basic ingredients are all there. You've got a respected Moorish general, his Venetian wife named Desdemona, and a sneaky villain who tricks the husband into thinking his wife is unfaithful.
But just look at the difference. Cynthia's story is a pretty straightforward morality tale. The characters are kind of one-dimensional. Shakespeare takes that simple frame and turns it into this profound psychological masterpiece. His characters feel real, they're complex, and here's the absolute game changer. In the original story, the villain is the one who kills the wife. Shakespeare has Othello do it himself. That makes the tragedy so much more personal and so much more devastating.
And that psychological depth is all driven by three unforgettable characters. The whole play is this intense, claustrophobic drama between Othello, Iago, and Desdemona. That's what makes it so gripping.
First, there's Othello. He's a celebrated general, the guy Venice relies on, but He's also a Moor. He's an outsider. His race makes him stand out, and it also makes people mistrust him. And this deep-seated insecurity, well, it's the crack in his soul that Iago is about to exploit.
And here's the guy who does the exploiting. Iago is one of the all-time great villains. He's a genius of psychological warfare. He can find your deepest fear and twist it for his own gain. And his greatest weapon? He seems completely, totally honest while he weaves this web of pure evil.
And then there's Desdemona, and she is not a passive victim. In a world where women had very little power, she defies her own powerful father and all of society's rules to marry Othello for love. She is strong, passionate, and has a will of her own, which makes her tragic end even more heartbreaking.
And this brings us right to the heart of the tragedy. This image just captures the devastating result of Iago's lies, a noble man driven by deception to destroy the person he loves most in the world. It's the ultimate collision of love and hate, of trust and betrayal.
So why does this play still have such a hold on us 4 centuries later? It's because the questions it asks, the fears it digs into, they're absolutely timeless.
I mean, think about it. The gap between how things look and how they really are. The way jealousy can completely poison your mind. The insidious nature of racism and prejudice. The roles and status of women. The desperate need to protect your honor and reputation. These things are just as relevant today as they were in 1604.
And that brings us to the final, chilling question the play leaves us with. Othello's tragedy isn't just about his specific situation. It's about his humanity. His downfall forces all of us to look in the mirror and ask, if a hero this great can be so utterly destroyed by doubt and lies, well, just how fragile